What is going on, comic fam? It is your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator David A. Byrne. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I am excited. I was able to reach out to you and talk to you about. Uh, I read your issue of Stake from Scout Comics, and I thought it was fantastic. And then I've been in this 3-month waiting period to read more about it because you guys have that where you guys kind of put out issue 1, and then you give the retailers a chance to kind of get that get their push in. So, but I am excited to sit down and talk to you about your latest book from Scout.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have come to us on our number ones. They're like, why can't I get number two? And it's driving people crazy. And as I hadn't experienced it yet so much as a creator, because it kind of drives me crazy too, because number two's been done for a long time. So I've
Yeah.
just been sitting there waiting to get it out. But I can tell you statistically, it's actually worked
Yeah.
for us.
Cool.
We've had some titles that I think the orders for number two would have been half what they were
Mm,
if it had come out right after number one, just because of the way the diamond ordering system is.
yeah.
So, like I
Yeah.
could give you an example. Black Cotton was a pretty hot title for us, and the number one sold out, but as number one came out, number two is available for order. So we actually had a very large increase over number one for the issue two orders.
Okay.
So it does work apparently.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it makes sense from a standpoint of putting that out there, for sure. I just know, like, I get so excited when issue 2 comes out because I'm like, yes, now I can read it, issue 2, issue 3 in the next month. Like, I get excited for sure. But if I'm okay with that too as a reader, as if I know, like, hey, that gives the opportunity for the books to breathe and allow new people to come to it and keep that series going longer for me. I would much rather have that than to say, oh, give me books 1, 2, 3, 4, and then people don't know about it as much. I'm like, I'm okay because I'd rather have more in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually a retailer for a couple years, so I experienced having to order a number one from an unknown title, then
Mm,
immediately, before we ever get it on the shelves, having to order two and three often. So
yeah,
how do you do that? How
yeah,
do you order number two and three when you have no idea how number one's going to do?
right. It makes it, and if you think about it, with every other thing, like, I'd order subscription boxes or things like that, and I know people get upset, like, I got charged for another box before I even got my first one, like, how do, and like, but then we expect the comic industry to be like cool with that, and it's like, so it makes sense, especially for the retailers. So, but let's talk about how you got into comics. But like, I always like to know, as I bring on a creator, just how did you get into deciding you wanted to create comic books?
Well, it pretty much starts. Um, I think I got my first comic in like '87, maybe when I was about 5 years old. I remember it was a Transformers comic. I probably have it somewhere. Don't remember what it was about or anything. But just in general, I've been a collector of things
Mhm.
basically forever. So comics, cards, Magic the Gathering, lots of sports cards. I've got all of it. I took a really long break from comics and everything, but I was always writing. So
Mm.
my first comic I wrote, I was 9. It was about two cat superheroes and they fought Dr. Claw, which, obviously I didn't even think about it at the time, but that Inspector Gadget. So, but
Sounds
that was the
fantastic though.
first one. Yeah. And that was 30 years ago now, and I've never stopped writing,
Yeah.
but it's been mostly prose, and I wanted to do screenwriting. So for a decade or so in the 2000s, basically, I wrote a bunch of screenplays, but never bothered to try to get anything produced. And um, then in probably 2012, I decided to actually go back to school, and I got a degree in entertainment business. Learned how much it was going to cost to make a film out of one of my scripts, and decided to turn that one into a novel
Oh,
instead. So this is a long way of getting to how I got into
no,
comics.
this is great though. This is awesome. This is what, because everyone's story is so different and unique. I love to hear how people get into it. So no, this is perfect.
Yep. So in around that time, or I guess 2014, 15, I I decided to turn my screenplay Shady Place into a novel so that I could actually get people to read it. Because when I budgeted the film, it looked like it was going to cost me, even on the low end, if I got like some B-level actors, $3-4 million to make. So didn't seem like that was something that was going to happen without any help.
Yeah.
So I self-published that, and you know, the average book sells about 250 copies. We did over 1,000 being self-published, so I was very happy with that.
Yeah.
The reviews were good. Literally has nothing to do with comics or anything in the comic industry. It's basically a book about an ex-detective in Philadelphia who retires to a 55 and up in Florida, and finds out his neighbor is the mob boss he chased his whole career. So it's kind of a buddy comedy, but also about accepting where you are in life, because they're older, so
Yeah.
completely different. But one of the main themes in almost
Sounds
everything I
fantastic.
write is it's acceptance of kind of um, finding yourself, finding out who
Hmm.
you are, because it's a theme we all struggle with. Pretty much, I'd say most of us struggle with it. I know a lot of us have imposter syndrome, so that's all
Yeah.
part of it.
Yep.
So um, in around that same time, when I was deciding my next project, I was just looking at my ideas, and being having been a comic fan, most of my life, and having just started really getting back into comics. I remember it was the death of Wolverine that pulled me back in. that that little mini.
Hmm.
So I had the idea for the couch, and just looking at it, I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna learn how to write comics, and that was the first one I did. And ironically, the person who did the audiobook for Shady Place, I knew he knew a lot of people in the art community, and I said, "Do you happen to know any comic artists?" And his brother was a comic artist, so we hooked up. I wrote the script after doing a lot of research and learning that there is no set script for comics. So
Mm.
unlike screenwriting, where it needs to be this way, there's format, it's pretty rigid. S- Scripts for comics are whatever works for you and your artist. So mine still kind of look like screenplays, but that's beside the point. So yeah, then from there, that's we did 4 issues together, and that's where it all started.
Nice. And no, that's what's so cool, because some people are like, I just started right away. I never read comic. Like, so I love to hear people's stories, because they're all different. Like, I mean, done so many interviews, and this is different from everyone else's. And I think that's a beautiful thing, to just get to hear people's kind of origin stories of how they got into liking comics and writing comics and creating. So that's great. So let's talk Steak then, because that was a book that I got exposed to your writing and who you are. Um, if people haven't gotten to read issue 1 yet, tell them what it's about.
Okay, steak is hard to summarize, so I do my best when I do it, because there's bigger overall themes. But
Okay.
the short version is, vampires announce themselves to the world on national television by ripping someone's heart out. The Our main character, Steak, it was one of her good friends, and she was there when it happened. So that happened 3 years before the story starts, and she has spent that 3 years basically training and becoming part of the Vampire Bounty Hunting Union, where she now is partnered with an actual vampire, and their job is to track down unregistered vampires.
Sounds pretty great, doesn't it, people?
Yep.
People want, if they haven't read it, they're like, I want to go pick it up right now.
Yeah, and I realized the part that I fail with my summary is that she is very much so a modern teenager, and that
Mm,
she gets in trouble because she is basically live streaming when she's trying to catch some vampires. And she's constantly on social media, but she hides her face, but she's always there doing that, connected thing. But then in the what I've seen personally, and I think is true, she's also lacking that personal connection with a lot of people, where she does all this online stuff, but she doesn't really have any real life friends.
right.
So it's not just a vampire story, it's the story about this girl who happens to hunt vampires.
Yeah. And it's such a cool, because it adds the social media element, kind of adds another twist and another layer to the story, that it's not just, like you said, not hunting, but it deals with, it seems like it's dealing with her as, like you said, as a person trying to, as being a teen, like, who thinks it's appropriate that she should be live streaming this. And so how did this process, and how did it come about of creating this story? Is this something that you've always had in the back of your mind? Is it like just one of those like ideas that came around all of a sudden one time?
I get asked that a lot, especially about this story. And the problem is, I don't remember when the seed came. Because what happens with me is, I'll be watching a TV show, I'll be reading something, I'll be having a conversation, and then in the back of my mind, I'm like, based on something I just heard, what if this happened with that? And the story was kicking around in my head for probably 2 or 3 years before I ever put it on
Oof.
paper. So, I mean, and that happens a lot with me. I know a lot of people write down every single idea they have. They got a notebook with, hundreds of ideas. I heard somewhere or read it, if you have an idea that won't go away, that's one to stick with. So I've probably got 15 or 20 of those that I don't have them written down, but because they keep, they're always in the back of my head, gestating,
Mm-hmm.
becoming something more. Like, if I don't wear my mind out before I go to sleep, I'll lay there for 2 or 3 hours just thinking and plotting. So I have to get really tired to go to sleep at night. But basically, that's the kind of thing that would happen with like steak.
Yep.
I mean, it went through, originally it was a boy. Then I just thought that's kind of overplayed, and then I do poke fun at the fact that, obviously she's a female vampire hunter, so there will always be parallels to Buffy.
Right.
So, I mean, I think you read the second issue. Someone actually calls her Buffy, and she gets pretty upset.
Yeah, she was not having that. um, and she lets them know what's up. Yeah, that, because I like that aspect, and that of how you brought it in. So when you created this book with this idea, you started to put it together, did you go and find your artists and your how did the book come together then as a team?
It's actually been a very long process
Okay.
on Steak. The Surprisingly, you'd think I've got money. I'm ready to pay an artist to do some work. I had to go through several that committed, then wouldn't be able to do it. The first one ended up taking 18 months for 26 pages. So it took us a bit longer to get off the ground than I wanted.
Yeah.
I had Derek Chu, as he was basically starting to release covers for DC. I already had a cover from him, but that was over 2 years ago. That cover just hit the street in January. So I was able to use it for Derek's sketch was insane. Like, it was just the sketch that he sent me as a proposal,
Okay.
and he let me use it for an ash can. So at MegaCon in 2019, I was able to put out an ash can for Steak and say, "Hey guys, this is coming." I assumed it was going to be out later that year, and it
Yeah.
wasn't. It was not finished until we did a Kickstarter for the number one with the previous artist last March or April.
Okay.
I don't know. With the pandemic, everything runs together. I don't
Yeah,
know
it's all
what was
fate.
when. So we did that, and then my thought with the series was to give him time. I was going to have him do 6 issue arcs, have someone else at the same time do spin-offs. So when he was working on the following arc, we could be putting a spin-off out. Then hopefully he would be ready for the following arc after
Yeah.
the spin-off was done, and just keep the cycle going. But what happened was, Francesca, who is the artist now, she did the first spin-off issue for me. She did so good, and, we became friends, and I was telling her, I don't know if I can keep going with the art being so slow. And she said, well, I can draw the whole thing for you if you want. So, and I'm not saying her art is better than Luis. It's different.
Yeah.
I think it fits the series.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, she loves working on the series, and we have big plans for the long term on it.
That's awesome.
So, yep, she's finishing pencils and inks on issue 4 now,
Okay.
and we just sent the solicitation for issue 6, so that'll be the first arc, and it'll be finished in August.
Okay. So you have the first arc in issue 6, but the way you're talking, it sounds like you have plans to go farther than issue 6, like to go be an ongoing if things go well. Is that the plan?
Well, in theory, if you look at that opening page of the series, it's Ashwin and 3 other vampires are there when they're killing the guy on TV.
Mm-hmm.
The way I foresee it is her battling one per arc, so kind of like she's leveling up as she gets better. She has to take on one, and she may not win. She may take one on in an arc, but there's no guarantee she's actually going to win the battle.
Right.
I mean, these are obviously vampires, and they're much older and more skilled than her, so she's going to have to do some kind of training along the way.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool. Let me ask you this. So what's your process for trying to figure out, like, what do you take from real world and put it into your comics and stuff? Because I know, like you mentioned, just that it's a very layered story, and it seems like you're dealing with real life issues, but put into the vampire world and put into a comic book world. Like you notice it in issue 2 of just kind of dealing with some of the situations that happen in that, and as well as what we're dealing with of her trying to process who she is, even as an adolescent in issue 1. How do you kind of determine how much you want to take from like real life world situations and stuff and put it into comic books or into your writing, or does that affect it at all?
I think fiction will always somewhat mirror reality, even if it's not the same. You'll be able to see themes that maybe aren't necessarily spelled out specifically, but you'll recognize them. I mean, there's some obviously tones to what's going on in our world right now. You see it very plain and clear in that issue. I mean, to me, character is the most important thing in any story. Like, if I just see a book that's like a 24-page action sequence, I get bored.
Yeah.
Like I actually, when we're reviewing submissions over at Scout, sometimes we'll get it's an interesting concept, but 12 pages out of 20 of an issue are one big fight scene. To me, that's a waste of space. I mean, if you are specifically doing, okay, this is a ninja book, all this is about is ninjas fighting, okay, but I'd rather have more depth to it. So that's where I come from. I mean, I have action sequences in mind, but they're only a couple pages.
Yeah.
So unless there's pertinent story to be revealed during those sequences, I'm going to keep them as short as I can, while making them epic. I mean, that's the whole beauty of the medium of comics, is between the panels. If you know how to read a comic, you're going to know what happened between the panels. You don't necessarily need to see, oh, they punched each other 7 times, so here's 7 panels, each one landing.
Right. Yeah. So, well, and you do a good job of, through the writing of, you want a book that's full of action, you put it in there for sure. And because, like you said, those couple pages, you get it, but it definitely develops into the story of, like you said, the character development. And I think that helps shift the world a lot and you can see that in your writing tone that keeps it moving along. But then you also get that action. Like, it's a very good blend from what I've read so far. So well done.
Yeah, well, it helps that Francesca's so good with her, the expressions, the motion. You can feel the motion in her art. I've heard people talking about that on a podcast the other day. They're like, which panels from a comic can you think of that show motion? And when I look through her stuff, I mean, you see it. You feel like things are actually in motion in a comic, which is fantastic because it's a still piece of paper.
You mentioned it just briefly, and I know I brought it up at the beginning of the show. You are one of the co-publishers at Scout Comics. What's it like having to share a title with Charlie Stigney? No, just
He's insufferable.
Ah, that guy.
He said, "Did you see how much my Kickstarter made?"
It's funny because when I had him on the show, it was before he was co-publisher. So I don't, this is a new world anyways for me. So I'm excited to kind of hear what that's like for you and, and what does that mean?
Well, it's actually a lot of fun. Working with Charlie is great because we have very similar opinions on the direction of Scout as far as what kind of books we should be doing, the creator relations, retailer relations, all that stuff. And I can't leave James Hake out, the president. He's basically the one who brought us in, and we're like a hydra.
Yeah.
The three of us have very similar thoughts on a lot of things, and we're just trying to help move this company forward. And I think just over the last year, it's been pretty remarkable. I mean, Charlie and I came on in July, but as co-publishers, but I've been with the company since spring of 2019.
Okay.
I was doing production. I helped with the website, things like that. And I mean, we've seen a lot of growth in just this year, and it really helped that as awful as the pandemic was, we were still able to get books to retailers, customers. We started our retailer direct program over that time, which allowed the shops that were open while Diamond was closed, they could still get books from us. And our printer is right down the street from our headquarters in Fort Myers, Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and they never stopped printing because they were considered essential. So we were go go go. And we've seen um, just in that time our website sales have grown. We started the subscription box, which is doing very well. I think it's coming from me, one of the guys who was part of it. I think it's a fantastic idea because really, if you like our brand and our line, you're going to get everything.
Yep.
I mean, you can't beat that, and the price is
and as someone who I feel like I've been on from either the first get-go or pretty on, because I felt like it started in June or July, or maybe not, but
yeah, roughly around then.
that's when I found out about it, and I've been on from board ever since because it's such a great, like you said, if you like what Scout's putting out there, you're getting the box at a very good price. And then you don't have to worry about, like, I don't have to worry about putting Scout books on my poll of like, oh, I hope Diamond doesn't mess up my boxes, like my subscription poll this week, or I hope my shop doesn't get shorted, like, because I just know I'm going to get it in the box.
Yep.
So I
Yeah,
think
and I can warn you, I guess it'll be the May box. Whenever stake number 3 is in there, I did something very special. So it'll be very cool.
And I mean, I got this cover, I think, from
Yep.
being in one of the boxes for stake 1.
That was the only place you could get that cover.
Yeah. So that's like, again, you get some of those exclusives like that. It's a really cool thing. So I think like what you guys are doing over there, like some of the innovation of like how you want to, like, I know we talked at the beginning of, doing issue 1 and then waiting to give, FOC time to catch up and for retailers to order and things like that, putting out the subscription box. Like you guys are doing some really cool strategies there that I think are really moving the industry and moving forward a lot.
Yeah, we really just want to make sure that as many people as possible can get our books. I mean, we're the first non-DC publisher to be on Lunar. We've actually got books on FOC. No, we are not on FOC on Diamond, but we're on FOC on Lunar. So our first FOC is next Monday for a couple of titles.
Nice.
And we've heard from directly from retailers that some of them only order via FOC, so they never order any Scout books. Now, when they go to order their DC books, it's going to be just DC and Scout on the list. So once they scroll through all the way, they're going to be like, oh, what's this?
What's this? There's more.
Yep. So, and with the thing we did that's a little different is we were coming in mid-cycle on a handful of our titles, like Stake number 4, Black Cotton 3, Black Friday 3. Those were going to be the first issues available through Lunar. So what we did is we actually are FOCing the second prints of the number 1s, the number 2s, the number 3s that we had already put out through Diamond, they're going to be available so that they can catch up. And I can only imagine that if you're a store and you see, oh, number 3 of this series, I'm not going to order that. I didn't
Right.
get number 1 and 2. So
Right.
we're hoping that that helps them with that situation.
I'm having a blast, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So I hesitate to ask you, you have other stuff that you're working on? Do you have other things that you're putting out or getting ready to start with what you're doing already with over at Scout? But I know you mentioned one of your first books, Couch. But is there other stuff that people can find if they want to know what you've done or if they want to what you've got coming up?
Well, you can always visit my website, davidabyrne.com. That's got information about Shady Place, which was my novel, The Couch. We have an issue of Spider Man out, and some info on Steak. We did do a spin-off issue of Steak called Steak Presents Jessamy, set in the mid 18th century, where she's over in Europe, but rumors from the New World have made it sound like there are basically monsters eating people on a plantation in Louisiana. So her quest becomes to go, basically, her job at the time is to make sure that no one else knows vampires exist.
Mm.
So she comes to the New World to handle her business. That we've got issue 1 of that out. We're going to be kickstarting the other 2
Okay.
hopefully this year. I Francesca can't draw it until she finishes with the main series for Scout, and then hopefully in a year or 2 those will come out through Scout as well at some point.
Cool.
Yep. I mean, I've got dozens of projects, but I can't talk about them.
That's usually how it goes. And gang, everything David that he said is listed below, website, how to get connected. If people want to follow you, social media, what's a good way for people to stay connected?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Both are DAB282, DAB282. So I know it's kind of not creative, but it's been my moniker for 25 years. So why change now?
Right. So again, those will all be linked below. So and David, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to just talk about your book, working at Scout, and just sharing your story of comics with us.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. With that being said, hopefully you all can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.